What if the real advantage isn't fitting in, but not fully understanding the system at all? What if the people who succeed the most aren't the ones who've been inside the game the longest, but the ones who can step outside of it, just enough to see it clearly? And what if the reason you feel stuck right now is because everything around you feels normal? By the end of this episode, you'll realise something subtle and powerful. You're not trapped by reality, you're shaped by familiarity. From early on, you're taught how life works. School, qualifications, career progression. Over time, that becomes the path. Not because it's the only one, but because it's repeated the most. And repetition is powerful. It forms beliefs. Beliefs shape behaviour, and behaviour becomes identity. Eventually you stop questioning the structure itself and start optimizing within it. You don't ask, is this the right system? You ask, how do I succeed in this system? That's where most people stay. Now imagine someone encountering the same system for the first time. They don't see tradition, they see patterns. They don't see rules, they see choices. They notice inefficiencies that insiders overlook because those inefficiencies feel normal. That's the stranger's advantage. Distance creates visibility. But here's where it gets more precise. Outsiders don't always see better, they see differently. And that difference is where insight begins. Outsiders often spot opportunities insiders ignore. But insiders understand constraints outsiders underestimate. Someone new might say, why don't you just change this? While someone experienced knows the hidden complexity behind it. So real insight doesn't come from distance alone. It comes from combining distance with understanding. The most effective perspective is not outsider or insider, it's both. It's the ability to step outside the system, question it, and then step back in with clarity. You can see elements of this in real life. In the US, for example, Indian Americans on average outperform national averages in income and education. Now, it would be simplistic to say that that's just because they're outsiders. It's not. There are selection effects, cultural expectations, ambition, risk tolerance, and education pathways all playing a role. But outsider perspective is often part of that equation. When you enter a system from the outside, you're less likely to accept its limits as fixed. You analyse it, adapt to it, and sometimes exploit gaps that insiders don't even notice. That's why companies bring in external consultants, not because internal teams lack intelligence, but because they lack distance. Imagine a business running the same way for 20 years. Processes become habits, and habits become unquestioned truths. Then someone new walks in and says, why do you do it this way? And suddenly no one has a clear answer. Not because there isn't one, but because no one has asked why. That one question can unlock changes that insiders were too close to see. The more exposed you are to something, the less you examine it. Your routines, your habits, your decisions, they start to feel justified simply because they're repeated. An outsider observing your day would quickly spot inefficiencies, distractions, wasted motion. You don't see them, not because you lack awareness, but because you're inside the pattern. Familiarity doesn't just create comfort, it reduces visibility. This dynamic explains why disruption often comes from the edges. People outside industries question assumptions others accept. New creators ignore rules that established players follow. Fresh perspectives cut through complexity, not because they know more, but because they're not yet conditioned by what's normal. At the same time, the most successful disruptors eventually learn the system deeply, because raw perspective without understanding only goes so far. Distance gives you perspective. Immersion gives you accuracy. You need both. Too much distance and you become naive. Too much immersion and you become blind. The advantage comes from moving between the two, seeing clearly, then understanding deeply. So imagine observing your life as a complete outsider. Your routine, your work, your decisions. What looks inefficient? What looks unnecessary? What looks like it's being done simply because that's how it's always been done? Now switch perspectives. Step back into your life with full context. Which one of those things actually have valid constraints? Which don't? That gap between what feels necessary and what actually is where opportunity lives. You don't need to leave your life, you need to shift your perspective. Step outside your usual environment regularly. Learn from people in different industries. Expose yourself to different ways of thinking. Then return and reassess your own systems with fresh eyes. Question what you've accepted. Keep what works. Challenge what doesn't. That process, out, then back in, is where clarity develops. Most people never step outside the system enough to question it, or they step outside but never stay long enough to understand it. So they either remain stuck or become disconnected. The real danger isn't being inside the system, it's being inside it without ever questioning it. Opportunities don't just come from working harder within the system, they come from seeing the system differently, and that requires both distance and depth. Because once you can step outside what feels normal and then step back in with understanding, you're no longer just participating, you're operating with awareness. That's the real stranger's advantage, not just seeing differently, but seeing clearly without losing touch with reality. And once you reach that point, you don't just follow the system, you start to reshape it. And if you like this episode, please don't forget to follow, like, comment and subscribe. And just a quick shout out to our sponsors. Strong Coffee Company, protein-packed coffee for energy and clarity. Use code Vancrux1 for 20% off at strongcoffeecompany.com. And then there's More Labs, clinically proven hydration and recovery drinks. Use code Vancrux1 for 25% off at morelabs.com. And finally, liquor gummies, electrolytes and vitamins for hangover prevention. Use code Vancrux1 for 20% off at liquor.com. That's liquure.com.